Okay, can you all hear me? Great. I'm really thrilled to be here tonight. I think most of you must know Scott Allen because he is I can't find him all of a sudden. There he is. He is very committed to coming here and always trying to get me to attend. But I have two little people and my husband commutes, so it's really difficult to get here. But I'm excited, thrilled to be here, and also we love having you here. And so I'm excited to give you a little more details about the process of the Arboretum. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is our master plan process and really focus more on the restoration component because that is more of my area of the world. Well, this whole project has had so many different voices that, and it's been very collaborative from the community. A lot of people here this evening have contributed. And then our design team itself is very big. And Design Workshop have been the lead landscape architects. And then we've had Reed Hildebrand. They've also been the landscape architects on the team. They're focusing more on the Ravine area, and I'll talk about that at the end. And then the Wildflower Center, Walter P. Moore, and SWCA, ETM Associates, who's helped. They started with Central Park and thinking about how do you actually manage landscapes, and helped us come up with a fiscal understanding of what management would look like. And we also have had an interpretive design, wonderful people, Main Street Design, and Dr. Watson from Texas A&M for the trees. I started out on this project. I've actually been in this project for 7 years as a consultant. I was working at the Wildflower Center and was here taking soil samples. I loved taking soil samples here, much better than Central Texas. And so it's been really wonderful to be here as a consultant and then have the opportunity to be here as part of the team that's implementing the design. And so oh good, that went away. As you are probably aware, we had Hurricane Ike in 2008, and then we had the drought culminating in the summer around 2011-ish. And that resulted in 50% of our tree canopy dying, and as well as Memorial Park. And this was a big eye-opener for the Arboretum, and it made it clear that we need to rethink our relationship with the landscape. And essentially, over what's happened historically is we've taken out natural disasters such as fire that would have kept things more in check and more diverse, but it became very overgrown. And what we had was where we saw a majority of the trees die was because of this pimple and dimple complex. And are y'all familiar with pimples and dimples? It's really fun to say. I think in the East Coast they said something like clouds and pans or something. They say something much more like pimples and dimples. But essentially the trees that survived, I think I can do this. This would be considered a pimple. It's very subtle topography. It's about 6 inches in changes that you're seeing. A foot is a big pimple. And then you have these dimples. And then in the lower area, in the dimples, there's actually different soil. The soil is more clay here. And then in the higher area is a more sandy complex. Andy Sippets came out and talked with us, and I'll talk about that in some future slides. But so most of the trees that had come in because we didn't have the natural disturbances, we didn't have buffalo grazing and other things like that, the Arboretum became overgrown. They came into these lower lying, which we have an extensive amount of these lower lying areas. And then when the drought came, they weren't as strong, whereas the ones up on these pimples had a stronger rooted system. And that's where they should be. Grasses are more appropriate for this system. This is a Gulf Coast topography that you would see in a prairie system or a savanna system with some mottes and then grasslands around them. And this was very informative to our whole restoration. So as part of the design team did a very extensive site analysis. So they looked at the hydrology, they looked at the soils, they looked at, here are the historic soils. These are historic prairie soils. And then they overlaid that information with the canopy mortality and then the prairie soils, and they saw a correlation that most of the trees died in the historically prairie areas. And so that was really good information for them. So the overall vision for the landscape portion of the master plan is how can we increase diversity on the site? At the time when we started, it was essentially a monoculture. It was an overgrown, unhealthy woodland where we had, and very, it had Ike where a lot of the trees had been really damaged. We lost a lot of trees, larger, bigger trees. So not only had it not been actively managed in a way, it also had a lot of damage to it. And so we had a lot of big invasive species. The mid and understory was really overgrown with ligustrum species. And then our canopy and diversity was very limited. So what the vision was to bring back, these prairie systems. At the time, they were very ambitious with these big, huge corridors of prairie. Through practicing and doing this on the ground, we discovered that it's really gonna look a little bit different. It's gonna be much more Maudie, savanna-like. But to focus on prairie and savanna, and then also looking at our woodland condition and how can we make our woodland condition healthier as well. And then the bayou. And that's one area where we're not actively really managing at this point in time, but we would like to get more diversity in terms of some larger trees that we've lost as well. Yes.
In orientation, is the right side towards the railroad track?
Oh yes, thank you. So this is Woodway up here, 610 is right here, and then the railroad track is on this side. So the east side is really more of the prairie, and then our woodland is more on the west side. So the master plan has taken a while, and we've had some funding issues, and then we've also just had timing issues as well. And so it's given us time to reevaluate our vision and what is the highest priority. And one of the things that we were going to have that was actually at the very top was an event center and a visitor center. And while that is still very important and something that we want to have, when we looked at what we could do financially and timing wise and everything, we went back and asked, what is mission critical? Mission critical is getting this building in a more functioning space, education and conservation, and also getting our landscape in a healthier condition as well. And so while the visitor center was slated to be right about here, that is probably going to be happening down the road, but not within this portion of the master plan. So this is where we landed, was having this entrance off of 610. This is already one of the main components, one of the big desires through our stakeholder process and everything like that, was to have more visibility. Everybody said, oh, the Arboretum is one of the secrets of Houston. People don't know about this place. And while in some ways that's nice for some of us, it's also something that it doesn't help hit our mission, and that we want to reach more children and get people more educated about nature. And so just starting our construction on the 610 side, so many people were like, what's there? What building are you building? And a lot of inquiries. And so we have seen an increase in visitorship just from that, which has been a large success. So this is also, I consider, our woodland restoration area. And then we also have we redid the Woodway entrance quite significantly. And these are 2 stormwater ponds. They function as stormwater and also constructed wetlands. And so all the site runoff from the master plan gets taken to here and is cleaned and infiltrated, and then the outrun goes into the ravine system. And then our savanna restoration is really this portion in here. And then the other component of the master plan is definitely renovating this building. We are working on right now the work in the old footprint of the parking lot. Can y'all hear me when I turn this way? Great. Is we are building an administration building, so all of staff can get out of here and get over there, and then they'll take our offices and make those into classrooms. And then an opportunity that was an unplanned opportunity. It was going to be much closer to this building in the first iteration of the design, and we felt like it was too close, and we moved it to the back pad of the parking lot and shifted it a bit, and then it made this nice interior space that we can use for events. So it will meet part of that need, that we'll be able to have weddings and larger group events in there. And so we're working on that design currently right now. And then we also built a new conservation center. So where our older area was over here, we've now built this here, and it's much more functioning. It's wonderful. We've got it laid out, and it feels really good. It's like we're actually professional managers of a landscape. So it's really nice. And our offices will be there as well. And then the last component is a nature playground, and that is being looked at a little bit more closely, and the exact footprint of that is still being evaluated, but we're very excited about this because we just getting children to have that tactile experience of nature. You know, I have little children myself that I just feel like the way our culture is, they're not getting out as much as I would love for them to be and exploring freely with different things. So, and I think it ties in with our mission perfectly. So the Ravine, we are currently working on that now. So we are putting in a new trail system. It's been closed for about 3 years because of the intense rain events that we have had. Things have been washed out. We had a sinkhole. The old infrastructure went that way, and then there was a break in the pipe, and so we discovered a sinkhole that I always tease Debbie. I was like, you could have fit your car in there. And I think that this is going to be an area that is going to be really successful. I'm excited about it. We've learned a lot through this process with this. The first vision of the master plan really wanted to make this area the gem of the Arboretum and highlight it and really overtly plant it. And it was highly designed. And that was one of my main concerns, because I said, well, this is one of our most dynamic and pretty vulnerable spaces. And I don't know if that's a wise allotment of our funds. And then we've had so many big events that also has made us rethink it. And so we've hired 2 different fluvial geomorphologists, and we had, the first one did not go very well, so we went with the second one that met more of our vision, and I'll go into detail about that in just a little bit. So big picture, zooming out, I love this picture because this is when we go to the island, and it's one of my favorite things to do. And small scale, why I like it too, is talking about island biogeography and how, just at a really small scale, we just go out there on a yearly basis, but I think we've missed this year window, we've been so busy, and have done little, just minor things to manage it, and it's a healthier system just from when I've been here. And so what I like to say is, there's a lot of thoughts of leave nature alone, people are bad. We have a lot of examples of where we've done bad things in nature, but that we do have the capacity to do good things. And I don't really see how we can have a zero effect on our environment. I feel like we are part of the environment. I strongly believe we are nature and we are part of nature. And that I think, as much as we need a healthy environment, the environment needs us to help keep it healthy, especially in these urban conditions. So that's been some of the change through this master plan process, is that we are more proactively managing the landscape so that it will have more ecosystem services and function better. And then another component of this master plan is that we are part of the Sustainable Sites Initiative. Are you familiar with this program? It's a green rating program for landscapes, similar to LEED. Actually, I worked on it at the Wildflower Center and taught graduate students at UT, landscape architecture graduate students, about sustainable sites. And it's very rigorous. It's more rigorous than LEED. And it's really based on quantitative, showing that there's benchmarks and that you are increasing ecosystem services. And one of the things that I find exciting about the program is that it's elevating landscapes. So we prioritize in the development world buildings and infrastructure, but then landscapes kind of tend to get misused, treated, devalued. Well, sites elevates that to the same level. And I love using this picture because you see the Arboretum right here, and what a valuable piece of landscape that is. And also it holds the vision that every project holds the potential to conserve, restore, and create the benefits provided by healthy ecosystems. So it seems so simple for environmentalists like us. The first credits are about preserve what you have there. But that doesn't get done so frequently. It's so much easier just to level something and then start over. So it's those simple steps of preserve, restore, and then if you add in more benefits as well, that's additional. And we're slated at this point in time to be, that we're doing really well in the project. And I think a lot of that has to do with who we are as an organization, our practices, and then also our educational components, because there's credits for educating and teaching about it. So we're kind of an ideal project. And so just to talk about our initial methods that we took, starting the restoration, we talked to a lot of local experts, some in the room. We had a restoration charrette and brainstormed a lot of different things. We went to different reference sites, and I'll talk about this a little bit more too. We did some pilot projects and tested out different methodologies. And then we also established a long-term monitoring project where we got some baseline data on the vegetation, and then we've also been looking at pollinators as well. And we're hoping to show over this multiple year project that we truly are increasing diversity and ecosystem service. So this is an example of us at Green's Biomitigation Bank. Andy Sippets took us there. And this was a really big eye-opener for us because it showed these different motte systems, and you go into the different grasses, and we saw, we touched the clayier soil and then the sandier soil where the motts were, and then we came back home and did the same thing and saw it here. And it gave us a real tangible vision for what we were going for. This is just an example of some of the research partnerships we started. We have some interns. We worked with University of Houston downtown. Rice University, Scott Solomon has brought students out here on multiple occasions. And we're constantly kind of evolving those partnerships and growing those as well as master naturalists come out and they contribute and do projects here as well. So what we did we also, because of timing, things didn't happen as quickly as we thought they were going to. So I was glad about that because it gave us an opportunity to test some of this stuff out at a smaller scale. So if you're familiar with the site, we have what we call a 5-acre pilot here that we worked on for the Savannah. And then we divided up the site by the trail system, and we have different management units. And Unit 4, this is the shortcut trail, and this is the inner loop, and then this is the swamp. So this is Unit 4. We call this the hairpin turn. Is any of this helping? So this is our woodland restoration area that we worked on as well. And the idea was, we were pretty overwhelmed in the beginning. How are we going to do this? And we wanted to have some small successes versus large failures. And we learned a great deal through this process. So just in Unit 4, what we did is we have a lot of volunteers, we have a lot of corporate groups and Eagle Scouts. And before I started, they were kind of all over doing different projects. We decided, well, why don't we concentrate that effort into one of our management units? And so we did it in Unit 4, and it was all just with loppers, cutting down ligustrum privet and some yaupon, and clearing that understory. And we saw, just with some small intervention like that, we saw the site immediately give us indication that we were pushing things in the right direction. And that we had more light, we had pollinators, we had flowers, it was much more alive. If you go into those really thick ligustrum areas, it's just very quiet. And it's amazing the difference. And so here in Unit 1 in the Savannah, we went through an extensive mapping exercise, and I'll show you that, and then GPS and tree assessment. We flagged the trees, and then working with the city for the tree mitigation process. And that took quite some time. And again, I'm glad we did it at this smaller scale, and we had to take such baby steps. And so if we had done this at the larger scale, it would have been very costly and taken a long time. And then also, I really appreciated this pilot process because I felt like we got to learn ourselves and then also educate the public on what it was going to look like and get them comfortable. And we didn't have as much outcry as I thought we might have, which was good because I think a lot of people were on board about the benefits of restoring Savannah. So one of the things that we did do that I think is quite remarkable just in the industry, most contours are every foot interval, and that's very common. But when you do that in Houston, especially on our site, it gives you no information because it's so flat, except for the ravine. And so we took those and broke those down into 0.05 meters. And we actually began to read the landscape. I don't know if you can see some of those contours. But so, for example, this is more of a pimple where the green is. These are the pimples. And again, there's super subtle differences. So we really use the pimples and dimples to inform us in the restoration. You know, where should the trees be? And these are the larger trees that Dr. Watson had, the pines and post oaks that he identified. It wasn't as perfect of a correlation as we hoped there would be, but that's nature, it's not perfect. But it did really inform us. And we did, think, well, maybe there used to be a post oak on this pimple and this is a younger post oak on the other side. So our priority species in terms of the restoration were really our post oaks and pines, and then evaluating from there. This was also an example of, this is the layer that Dr. Watson looked at. These are all the trees that were there that we looked at and assessed. And the yellow ones would keep, and then the darker ones are the ones that we proposed to have removed. This is what it looked like when we first did our site assessment. Whenever I'm out there, I'm always like, do you remember when we were out here, we couldn't see one another? And it's just removing that. So that's what we started with. We could remove everything 6 inches and under. And we went through ourselves first and flagged all the good stuff 6 inches and under, which there is a lot of good stuff, and that was a good exercise. And then we went through and cleared that. And then we were able to clear without a permit some of the hazard and dangerous trees. And then this is before we were able to clear some of the larger living trees to get that opening and sunlight that's required for a savanna. And again, just through doing this process, we had great indications, especially the red-headed woodpecker was one that was really telling us that we were moving in the right direction. Yeah, oh, and the hawks were there immediately. Like throughout this whole process, it's been really very encouraging that things are telling us that it was becoming healthier. We also did within the pilot another test treatment of the implementation of our seed mix, working with the design team, and there was kind of part of my role has been a little bit to push the design team to simplify some of their specifications and their practices. And initially they wanted to have 10 inches of compost rototilled into the whole part of the master plan. I think now, they're very much on board with the decision, but they wanted to test and see if there were going to be these big significant differences. And so we learned a lot through it, all of us did together. And so what we did is we did 3 different strips. We did one where we only seeded, because a lot of our team who's been here for a long time, they were like, we don't even need compost. Like we just throw seed out, and I don't know why we need compost. Compost is very expensive. And then we did one where we did just an inch. I just was blanking if we did an inch or 2 inch, but it was an inch, right? 2? Yeah. Did we do 2? 2 inches of compost, and then seeded it, and then we did one where we air spaded it and integrated it into the soil profile. We went out there on a bi-weekly basis and monitored with the transect and quadrants, and we didn't find any statistical differences between the three. But what we did find is what sold me on the compost is that the watering requirement was a lot less, that we didn't have to water as much as we did for the area that was seeded. And then also this is looking at areas that haven't been impacted by the construction. And so the areas that have been more compacted or disturbed, I'm very glad that we're using some compost. But we're just doing it as a top dressing, we're not integrating it in, and it's working really well. The spec says it wants it to be John Ferguson, Nature's Way, thank you. And it says or equivalent. So they have substituted a couple of times. It's local because it's so expensive. People won't pay to drive it from way far away. But the compost industry, we did have some questionable compost at one point in the project where we had some weeds coming up, and I was like, I think this might be from the compost. So what we've done now is I got Debbie's approval because Nature Way is very expensive. I said, we're only doing Nature's Way from now on. So I think they use Nature Way for this treatment here. And then it was hydro-seeded, and then this is the result. It turned out really nice. And what we found essentially were more observational differences and not the statistical differences between the three. But we found that in the lower lying areas, seed had a harder time establishing, and then in the shade as well. And so that was our strategy, was to, we had a lot of plugs to put those more in the wetter areas and then in the shady areas. And it was also a great demonstration to say, this is what it's going to look like, to get people comfortable with that. And then I just wanted to throw this in there really quick. Within the pilot, again, we did a pilot of our first field station. I don't know if y'all have been able to go out to those yet. This is our Savannah field station. We had a lot of post oaks that have died, and we had some statues. And this Kevin Poe, this man, he's wonderful and has tons of energy. He has a traveling mill, and he came out here and milled our post oaks. And that is what the field stations are made out of, post oaks from our site here. Yeah, it's a lot of history. It was quite an effort. My husband, who's an architect, he was like, those are timbers. He got really into that. He was like, that's timber making. And just as who we are as well, the field stations are really wonderful. They're like integrating the landscape in a way, and the education, that where people really get to stop and look. So many people come to walk and just keep on going and don't learn about the subtle differences of the pimples and dimples. So I'm excited about that. And then at the large scale, we're giving the green light. This was our implementation process. We had a landscape contractor, so there's just it's sort of a machine. It's a little bit like a wedding, that things just, it becomes really big, the whole process. And you've got change orders and all of this stuff that you have to sort of manage, and dealing with contractors. It's a little bit stressful. But so the first thing we did is site prep. We went before the contractors and did site prep, where we were doing some invasive removal, and also doing controlling the invasives before they started planting, because we didn't want to go through and do our spot treatments of herbicide right as we had planted. And that threw everybody for a loop too, because that's not something that you normally do in your process. So then they put in the infrastructure and the utilities, which was very painful to watch. They did some irrigation installation, and we were able to reduce that design down. Initially, it was all of the irrigation was going to be underground, and we were able to talk to them about moving majority of it to temporary above ground. So that's something I was excited about. And then they planted the trees, and they put the compost, and they seeded in the zones, and then we did our plug installation. Challenges of this was really getting that official tree mitigation, but we did, and it was fantastic. And we went from a hard no from our first request to yes, and now you have some credit for if you want to do some outside of the master plan. There is a code, a development-based code, that say I'm Target and I come in and I cut down some trees and I build a building there, I need to replace those trees, which makes sense for development purposes. But there isn't a code for restoration. We weren't getting credit for, if we cut down those trees, they wanted us to replant the trees. And we were like, well, that goes against our goals for improving the ecosystem services. And we don't want to just plant trees that one either will die or that are going to, So then they talked about, is there a way to donate those trees to other places and things like that. And then finally we got them to value the financial input that we were putting into the savanna. So we got monetary credit for the restoration that we were doing in place for those trees. And that the amount of money that we were doing for that's how we ended up with credit above. The amount of money that we were putting into the restoration far exceeded the cost of the few trees that we were removing. So where was I? Tree mitigation? Is that where? Also, it's challenging because I think of it as like it's a house remodel rather than just starting from scratch. It's a retrofit. So we've got a lot of amazing resources here, such as our soils. We have pretty healthy soils for being in center of Houston. So trying to protect those as much as possible. When we first interviewed our contractors, our general contractor and landscape, I said, this may look like you have a lot of space to do your construction, but I want you to think of this as your most tight urban condition. Your envelope for disturbance is teeny. Just even finding the laydown area, appropriate laydown area, I really made it hard for them. So, but they've been wonderful. They've worked really hard with us on that. And the design team also wrote some really good specs. Field verification, that this is a really site-specific project, so that something that's done in your computer and you're looking at the trees even, then when you come out here, it's just different. There's a lot more on site. And that process, the whole design process, doesn't really allow for that type of flexibility and time to go back and change designs after you've done your 100% construction documentation, and there's costs associated with that and everything like that. So been a challenge. Tree and soil protection, as much as we've worked with everybody and educated everybody, given them the sites rundown, the sites rundown has vegetation, soil protection zones, you can't go in here, there were signs everywhere. There still was a lot of tree and soil damage. And so we had to mitigate that and work on that. Native plant material, just doing something at this scale, it's been really hard. The industry is just not there, a lot of the plants that we want. So I'll show you some of the creative ways that we've done things, and things are getting better and better. And we've learned a lot, and I feel like there's more resources out there than when we even just first started this project. And then, as maybe some of you all are experiencing, we did not know exactly through the phasing and the way that the site is happening is we had to go back into areas that we've already constructed. So that fire lane, that DG main path, was never intended for huge equipment to be driving back and forth on top of it. So we know once this is all done, we need to redo that. So we're kind of living in the middle of our remodel. And I appreciate that y'all still come here and that we're living through it, and it's going to be great when we're done. And then also for our team, we really miss the south portion of the site. We haven't had enough time to really think about the rest of the site. A lot of our attention has been on this master plan process. So some of the lows of the process, we had one incident where they actually seeded with Bermuda. which is horrible. Like even I say it right now and I have a physical reaction. I was depressed for about a month, which Scott can attest to. And I still I have a hard time releasing responsibility, but nobody knows exactly what the story was, if it was left over in a tank or somebody actually gave. I feel like somehow a bag of it got somehow integrated into it. But that is something now that is going to be a long-term management issue that we've inherited. That we have enough challenges as they are, but we have been working on that really aggressively through these winter months. Because a lot of our taller material is now shorter, we can really see the Bermuda, and which is in some ways horrifying, but also we can do more about it. And I think we are making a good dent on that. And then here's an example of an unnecessary. We were transplanting some trees. I stood out there that night, talked to them. Before I left for the day, I was like, "This is the route that you're going to take over here." La la la. They went this way, right next to all these pines, and didn't listen to me. So those are, some of that part of doing these types of projects. Highs. Our highs is just one, how quickly the site has responded, how quickly vegetation is filled in, and then just really the real joy has been the wildlife response. And as I was talking about the birds, I have a 3-page Kelsey. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Kelsey Lowe. She's has a master's in ornithology here, and she's written a bird habitat restoration report on 2018. I'm happy to share that as a resource. Just a lot of amazing new species. We have the kestrel, we have the kingfisher. That's been really fun. And the very first day we started putting water, we had a little Phoebe there at the spigot. And it's been amazing, the amount of dragonflies that we've had and pollinators and things like that. The butterflies, just walking here, that my daughter's like, "I want to go on the butterfly walk," I'm sorry? Oh yeah, and the ducks, the whistling ducks. We had whistling ducks.
Wood ducks too.
And wood duck. So yeah, it's been really, it's been encouraging. These are just a few slides. I just want to show you the changes. So this is what 610 used to look like. This is the new entrance and the overhead of the parking loop. On this side, we didn't remove any trees beyond the footprint of the drive. So this was an area where when we removed the underlayer, we were surprised that it wasn't as wooded as we thought it was going to be. So we ended up seeding this area with the savanna seed mix. So we used that same mix throughout the whole site. This is where we transplanted some trees from the Woodway entrance, and this is the 610 loop and entrance. So these red oaks that we transplanted, and they're doing really well. And so we had a very limited diversity in canopy trees, and we added 10 or more new or underrepresented larger canopy species, and then we added about 20 new or underrepresented diversity species to the area, because that's where we were really lacking a lot of the, really fun, sweet things such as the two-winged silverbell or the sassafras or fockelberry and things like that. And so we had 652 trees donated by Trees for Houston for a project that was really not tree focused. We were much more trying to establish the grasslands. So it's been exciting. They've been a great partner. This is the development on the Woodway side. We were able to transplant 33 bald cypress. They were in middle of the footprint of the donor boardwalk pond. So we took 16 out of there and put them into the savanna where there was another cluster of them. And then we were able to bring them into the whole experience of the ponds and have added to that already. Then we plugged the slopes of the ponds. Scott and I did that. It was slightly grueling, but fun. And this is the donor boardwalk, which is a big design feature and something that I'm grateful that we have designers with a vision such as this, because this has been such a wonderful space. This is the Savannah Boardwalk, which I don't know if y'all been out in here. So this is within our 5-acre pilot. And this was a victory for us because we were able to, one, put a boardwalk there instead of, they wanted to do another DG path, where the outer loop historically had dammed up the water there and we had lost a lot of post oak. And so we were able to do a boardwalk, and the construction of which they did that is with pilings. And the person who constructed it, he started it and built the first part and then put his equipment on top and did it as he went around. So there's very little disturbance and really minimal footprint. And he even put tarps out on the side for when he was doing construction and got all the dust, the wood dust up, and took it out and was. We have him putting a couple of other bids on for some other boardwalks, but he's a little bit expensive, but he's wonderful.
Yeah. Is it open underneath so the animals?
Yeah, so it's open underneath and the water can flow and
the rabbits,
yes. So it's, if money was no issue, I would prefer that we'd have boardwalk all over the site. You know. This is the opening of the Savannah, getting it to the density that we wanted. We kept a lot of motte areas, and I think we, are at where we need to be for the long term. It still is pretty tight in some areas. Some of the people from the Wildflower Center think that it's still too tight, but I think we're going to get the Savannah there. In terms of getting those open spaces for grassland systems, shade versus light. And so one of the additive things that we did, so we had a commercially purchased Savannah seed mix at the Wildflower Center. They were the consultants and worked on that, and the design team as well. And then we looked at it, and other outside people helped us. So that was our first strategy, and those were more kind of generalist species. Then we did with Katy Prairie Conservancy, and Alan Breimer really helped us with this effort. We went out and with land and collected seed. We collected seed from on site, and then just whenever they went on other field trips, and that's something that we're going to continue to do. Gail helped us clean a lot of seed, and has been very involved in our work. We couldn't have done a lot we have done without you. And so this was, something we collected a lot of seed, and then we were also this is Mark Morgenstern helped us get some spring obedient plant. It's another one that's really hard to buy commercially. And so this was a really great day as well. And then we took a lot of that seed, we added it when they did do the seeding, we put it in with the hydro seeding. And then we took the rest of that and we started our own nursery operation. I was like, are we crazy? We're already in this huge master plan process, and now we bought 1,000 containers, and then we filled them with soil. 100,000. Yes, thank you. Oh my gosh. Big difference there. I'm glad you're here. 100,000 containers. Every time I say these things, I think I've said this before, but I feel like Austin Powers. And I just did the Austin Powers thing there. So here we were. We filled them with soil. We tried doing that ourselves and with volunteers, and I looked around, I was like, there's no way we're gonna get this done in time. So our landscape contractor came in and watched our efficiencies and came up with a plan, and they filled it in like a week. They filled them all. It was amazing. And then in the end, we ended up with about 40,000 viable plants. Containers, and we still have a lot in there still. But I think it's been very successful. Unfortunately, we were under a time crunch, and some of the stuff went in the ground while I think it was a little bit too young. But then when we started getting out of the window, I said, let's just hold it. Let's hold off, and then we'll plant the rest in the fall and winter. And we did that, and they had a much better root system. And so what we're hoping to do next is really test the success rate of those containers. And then we seeded the larger savanna. We waited to seed that because, again, we were getting out of it was getting too hot. And so we seeded this, and then August was super hot. We had no rain. Then October was like it rained all the time. So then we seeded in November. We were hoping to seed in October. We're putting our plugs into the ground. So you can see some of them are still really teeny. But most of them had a good root system. So what we did with our savanna is we broke it up into 4 different areas. And we plugged primarily 1 and 2. 3 is part of our larger pilot area that we already seeded and was doing really well. But what we did is we went back into those wet and shady areas and plugged in there. And then 4 is what we plugged this fall and winter. And now we still have more plugs to go back in, and we're going to be working on that. So all of that is seed that we've hand collected from local areas. And this is an example of the savanna pilot. And it's come in and just is looking really good. And this is another from that Savannah boardwalk. And that's leading to the Savannah Field Station, if you'll have. Let's see that. So the last bit is the ravine. So I kind of set the stage a bit for this. What I like the most about this process is we're not doing it with a landscape contractor. We didn't put irrigation down there, and we're doing it much more in a restoration kind of way where we're just, Debbie's on board with us taking our time in terms of planting it, and the priority really is getting it more stable, and we've done some stabilization, but very minimal, just around where we've done the bridges. So what we found through our studies and analysis is that the bridges really were the biggest problem, which is really not much of a surprise. One I call our medieval bridge, because Jim's like, oh, well, this one we built here, and then we built something else on top of here, and then blah, blah, blah. And it was probably not even safe for any of us to be walking across. But that was really impeding the flow, and that was causing a lot of the flooding and the erosion, those 2 bridges. And so the main thing we did was removing those and putting in bridges at a much higher, longer span, so that we could really let the water flow through. Harvey taught us a lot, and then also changed a lot of the code and development. And so I feel that the bridges themselves are very reinforced on the edges. But the trail system, this is some of the stabilization using some of the trees from on site. The trail system at first was to have some concrete and then DG, and what we decided to do was really put our effort and energy into the bridges and getting those long, because that's expensive to get the trail really, the bridges long. They're like 31 or 32 feet long. Put our energy in that and just let the trails be mulch. We know they're going to wash out. We've seen areas where other material was not working, and let that be flexible, and let the channel itself be flexible if trees fall in. Because our first process was they really wanted to blow out the whole ravine and lay it back and take out a lot of trees, and we knew that we weren't comfortable with that as an organization. We knew also the city of Houston, after going through our Savannah restoration, would not be comfortable with that, and even the Army Corps of Engineers denied that first iteration. So we said thank you for the information that you've given us, and we moved on to a new approach. And this is the initial planting design that the design team did, and it's a little bit more extensive. 5 minutes? Okay. I think these are like my last few slides. But we've kind of understood the vision, the overall vision, and they're hoping, so what we're working on is at these bridge crossings and within the gullies to have kind of these strongholds of different tree species. Where there's a beautiful maple down there right now, and there's going to be a really nice education platform. We'll put in some more maples there, and then where there are some sycamores, adding a few more sycamores there, but then also getting that diversity in there, and then having some view sheds from this side to the other side. But we're toning it down, and we're doing it ourselves. Trees for Houston is helping us with the trees, and we're doing it at a very slow pace. So right now, we're about to start next week with the planting over at this bridge, and it's going to be pretty focused. We're also working with Memorial Park Conservancy. They did a lot of ligustrum removal along their fence line, and we were able to build the new fence, and that's similar to the Woodway side. And we're excited about that, and we'll be working with them next week. These are just some of our next steps, thinking about the actual maintenance and monitoring of things, and management, adaptive management, learning from what we've done. The ravine, prescribed burns is really something that I would like to see. And now that we've been given the green light to restore, now can we get the green light to manage? But there's a lot of discussions and things about that need to happen. And in the end, all of this is just so that we can meet our mission even better and reach children and get them passionate so that they will too be stewards for the landscape. Thank you.
Let's do a little Q&A.